Hi, Danielle.
Hi, Vera.
I'm very happy to see you.
I'm happy to
It's
see you
been a
too.
while. Really looking forward to this conversation. For everyone, in case anyone besides my colleagues from AppsFlyer will watch this podcast, I want to briefly introduce you, and please go ahead and add things that you feel are important for you.
Sure.
So Danielle is, first of all, also my former colleague from AppsFlyer. We met there. She's the expert in communication, and we're going to speak about communication because the whole idea of this podcast is actually for me to become a better communicator. Why I wanted to talk to you about the subject of understanding is because you have, I think, a very interesting positioning of not only being in multiple different companies, head of comms, external and internal, meaning you really know how to communicate and how to make sure people get the message. And also at AppsFlyer, your last role was chief of staff of our CEO, Oren Kaniel, which is also a very practical side of communication, making sure things are happening, making sure people are aligned on priorities and things are moving to the direction, to the right direction, basically. So that's why I thought it's going to be very interesting to talk to you about understanding.
Mhm.
I know this sounds like a very broad and general topic. And I want to start by grounding it a little bit. And because my podcast is very selfish, I want to become a better communicator. So I'll just tell you what I see and what I face, what challenges do I face. First of all, I feel that I'm very aware that I work not on my native language.
Yeah.
And I do believe that I spend more time making sure that people understand me, that they understand what I mean, and also that I understand other people. Uh, Nonetheless, almost on a daily basis, I do see that very often this understanding is not happening.
Yeah.
And to me, that was and is a very interesting subject. What is understanding? And because I mentioned this thing about me working not in the native in my native language, to ask you and start this conversation by asking you about your experience in CISV.
Okay.
So for people, I don't think a lot of people know what that is.
Should I explain what it is,
Yes,
maybe?
please go ahead.
So basically, CISV it's currently called CISV International, Building Global Friendship. It's an international organization for building cross-cultural connections mainly between children. It started after World War II. A psychologist started it in hopes of creating kind of like this experience for children where they meet children from other countries and other cultures, and hopefully with that increase awareness, increase global kind of activism, and increase interpersonal connections between people to decrease war. And that's a very, very beautiful and optimistic concept that started in 1951 and is still going on and active in over 200 countries, I believe, even to this day. Maybe less. I haven't been doing it for a while, but yes.
What was your experience there, speaking to being from Israel? I don't believe it was that intense back in the days, like, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago. But what was it like? What was your experience communicating with people from different cultures, different backgrounds, and understanding them?
So it's interesting because when I started doing CISV internationally, I was 14 years old. The first international camp that I did was in Mexico, and there were a lot of different countries there, but no Arab-speaking countries. So the conflict was discussed, but kind of at a distance, and also at a very one-sided point of view because the Israeli delegation would bring it up and talk about it, but there wasn't really another side to it. There were
Mhm.
third parties who were learning and understanding, and it was also very interesting. But, I would say that the gaps in how we communicated about the conflict were not very present. But when I was 17, I went to another camp, which was in Brazil, which had participants from both Egypt and Lebanon. So that was a whole different story, and it was also very in the beginning, it was very, I would say we were both especially me and the other participant from Lebanon were kind of a little keeping our distance from each other and kind of I wouldn't say scared, but a little bit apprehensive and trying wondering how it would work and if we would be
Mhm.
able to communicate with each other without kind of offending each other in some way. We ended up being she was my best friend, which always happens. It's the joke that we always make in CISV. It's like, in theory, the countries hate each other, but in practice, when it's people, we're the same people and we're very similar culturally, and it's very easy to understand each other. And while there might still be disagreements about politics, the communication is actually very easy because the communication style is very similar, even when the languages are not. Yeah. So for me, that was actually a very formative experience in communications because it taught me a lot about culture and about how culture brings us closer together, even when there are differences. I always felt closer to people from Egypt, from Jordan, from Lebanon than I did from people from the United States or even people from Europe or people from all over Asia. So it's funny because these borders separate us, but we are very similar, especially from my experience, at least people from Lebanon. It's really uncanny how similar Israelis and Lebanese people are. It's tragic that we're not able to build a closer alliance together. Hopefully, we will someday soon.
And if to talk about not specifically communication around conflict, I'm curious, is understanding possible? Because we all and this is why I also wanted to speak about CISV because this is a brilliant representation of people from different cultures, different education backgrounds, different education system. How far the understanding is possible, and also maybe to add to that, how do you feel when you're being understood? What are the signs that like this people understands me, and like I feel we're on the same page?
So I think for me, the most interesting part about CISV, and it's also the thing that helped me break the barriers, is and this is true actually for communication everywhere and for feeling understood everywhere, is when people come with open hearts and open minds. And I think that's something that's very I wouldn't say easy because it's never easy, but is maybe easier in a youth movement or in a setting where you are expected to be
Yeah.
open-minded, and a lot more complicated in a professional setting, for example, where a lot of times you don't really wanna be open-minded. A lot of people have preset notions, they have things they came with from home, things they came with from their previous work experience, and also a lot of times want to seem more authoritative or want to seem like they are the person that has the final say.
Mhm.
And a lot of times that creates a very closed mind. And it is very hard to understand when you're not trying to, when you're only trying to be understood. And I think for me, the best way to feel understood is that when people ask questions, because that's when I actually feel like they're listening and they're trying to get a better understanding of what I'm saying and even ask difficult questions. Because if I say something that somebody doesn't like, or even if I just didn't explain myself properly, for someone to ask questions, that means, okay, they're not taking what I said at face value. They're trying to get to what I was trying to say underneath it. So I think questions is a really big part of it. I think openness and really a sense of a willingness to receive something that you were not prepared to hear. And that is something that gets harder and harder the older we get. Actually, interestingly, I think it's harder for the youngest children and the older we get as adults, the more we have a preconceived notion of how things should happen, how things should move along. And I think that the key thing for us as adults and professionals was really to think about how how we can keep that open mind even when we think we know. Because a lot of times I'll come into a meeting, for example, and I do think that I know, even though I mean, I say this when I try to be a very open-minded person and I try to come with a very open heart and open, clean slate, as they would say, for any new professional challenge, but it's hard. And a lot of times I have something in my head, I'll listen to them, but I think I know what we need to do. And to really be able to fully listen. And I have a friend who said this to me when I was 17. She said it to a friend of ours and it really resonated with me. She said to him, "When I talk to you, I feel like you're only waiting for your turn to speak. You're not listening to me." And that's something that happens to a lot of us. And you have to kind of move that out of the way and not wait for your turn to speak, but fully listen and then establish what you want to say, how you want to communicate, how you want to move the conversation forward. And yeah,
I love that we're getting practical.
yes.
So I'll start also summarizing the things like
Yes.
primarily for myself. So I think a lot of the things in life are just skills or practices. My work bestie, he is always telling me everything is a practice. You just need to practice every day, and then you're gonna get to where you want to be. So understanding, first of all, do you think understanding is also a practice and a skill? And then, if yes, I want to also us kind of start figuring out it's a practice and a skill of what. And I want to, sorry for like collecting a few questions and under the same box. Um, you mentioned that you're trying to be open.
Yes.
Can you explain and give an example of how? Because it is hard. I can tell for myself it is hard to be open because I also tend to kind of come and think I know the best way.
Yeah.
I've been there, I've done that, and listen to me. I know, and just sometimes even being arrogant and saying, don't just ask questions, just listen to me. We don't have a lot of time, we have a lot of projects. I know, let's just. And I really relate to what you're saying that understanding starts with being open and listening,
Yeah.
but it's hard to, it's like also something a bit general. Like, how do you really, if you can give an example, like before, what do? You like remind yourself, I need to be open and listen, or how it's like internally, how does this work for you?
So I'll take it even one step back. This is actually another thing that I learned from CISV and then also later in my communications degree when I was an undergrad. There is something called the Johari window, which is two researchers, Ingram and another one, I'm very sorry that I can't remember his name, that talk about the structure of every person's personality, basically. And it's divided into four quadrants. One is what I know about myself that is very internal and is about like your own confidence and your own convictions and your own things that you know about yourself and how
Mm-hmm.
you this is true to everything, how you think, how you communicate, everything. Second quadrant is the things that both you and others know about you.
Mm-hmm.
So this can be, for example, you know that I am a communications professional, you know that I
A mother.
exactly, stuff like that. There's the third quadrant that is things that people know about you that you don't necessarily know about yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And the fourth quadrant is an unknown, is basically things that neither you nor other people know about yourself yet. And the way that it's kind of addressed in communications is that if you can minimize the third and the fourth quadrant, the things that you are not aware of and the things that nobody knows, that you are open and learn about yourself and are open to hearing about yourself as well, that improves your communications because
Mm-hmm.
then you are more self-aware, and when you are more self-aware, you can also be better aware of others, all of that. So I think that's also something that is a skill to work on, to kind of be open to feedback, but truly open to feedback and
Mm-hmm.
being receptive to hearing how other people feel about you, about the way that you speak to them, and the way that you listen. I think that's something, for example, the conversation I mentioned earlier, that friend, this was 20 years ago, and this friend still has trouble with that. And it's not coming from a bad place, but it is coming from a place of lack of practice. And I do think this is something that you can practice. It's
Mm-hmm.
kind of like going to the gym. It's hard and you hate it, but if you keep doing it, it's not going to be as hard. About questions. For me personally, I have a tendency of like my natural tendency is to cut people when they're speaking, like cut into people when they're speaking. That's not respectful or good for understanding or listening. So what I will often do is I have a piece of paper and a pen with me in meetings, and I write things down as they're speaking so that I can stop myself from saying it out loud.
Mm-hmm.
And then I can also better process what I'm thinking. And then this goes back to what you were saying about let me speak and like don't ask questions. I think Israelis love saying, ask questions during feel free to interrupt. I don't think that is conducive to understanding at all. I think you do need to let the person speak their piece,
Finish the thought.
finish,
Mm-hmm.
and then ask questions. It's more structured and
Interesting.
also enables usually more um, efficiency, in my
Mm-hmm.
opinion. So I think that's also a skill, learning how to actively listen
Mm-hmm.
without interrupting the other person. What else for understanding?
Wait, let me first summarize. So we talked
Yes.
about being open,
Yes.
actively listening.
Yes.
We talked about being this is like for everything in life, being just more aware about yourself, like minimizing those
Yeah.
quadrants that you mentioned, like
Yeah.
knowing yourself better and also being aware of not letting your subconscious controlling and ruling your life.
But also being aware of your limitations. For example, if I'm aware
True.
of the fact that it is hard for me to not cut into somebody's
Yeah.
sentence, then that's my problem. I don't need to bring that on to other people. I need to find
Right.
a way to fix that so that communication can be smoother and more
Right.
efficient.
Asking questions
Mm-hmm.
and was interesting. I never thought about like that the practice of asking questions in the middle is not helping the understanding and not helping the
In my
conversation.
opinion.
That's interesting. Um, so what else? I let's talk about. It's actually very connected to those, I think, four quadrants assumptions.
Yes.
I don't know even what question to ask. We're all the time assuming a lot of things. And this is 100% in my practice and what I see, and I see it every day at work. I thought that this is what you meant, and I thought this is what we're doing, and I thought even to the sometimes extreme situations where I thought on the back end, the system, the CRM is running this process.
Yeah.
It doesn't. Surprise. Like a lot of people are not
Right.
checking, are not double checking both, like sometimes the system and the processes and also what other people mean.
Yeah.
Again, I have no idea what question to ask. Just maybe like, what do you, your advice and how to uh, n- less assume?
Yes.
It's connected to questions
100%.
or to what else it's
It's
connected to?
connected to questions, and I think it's also connected a lot of times to follow-up, because a lot of times there will be a meeting and everyone it's like you said, people assume. You finish a meeting, if there's 5 people in the meeting, it's very, very likely that 5 people have 5 different views of what the next steps are.
Right.
So whoever is leading this meeting process, whatever, needs to finish the meeting with, "Here is what we talked about. This is what's happening now.
Mm-hmm.
Any questions? Is anything unclear?" And I think that's something assumptions, there's a saying in English, when you assume, you make an ass of you and me. It spells ass, you, me, assume.
Mm-hmm.
And that's very true. And that's also, it's very human. We're all creatures of habit. We assume based on past experiences.
Yep.
We try to put things into patterns that are familiar to us so that we know how to move forward. But it truly is a huge hindrance to understanding, because my assumptions will be nowhere near your assumptions. Maybe you and I, in some cases, they will be similar. But for example, I can tell you that me and my husband have learned that 9 times out of 10, when one of us assumes something, if we hadn't clearly communicated, it's a completely different assumption. So the assumption is useless, and
Mm-hmm.
something that feels helpful is actually a hindrance to communications and a hindrance to progress, and definitely to understanding. So it's about asking questions, but also about making statements at the end. Like, this
Mm-hmm.
is what I meant.
Yes.
Is that clear?
Clear.
Do you have a
Do
question?
you understand?
And very plainly. And I think
Yeah.
also a lot of times people are almost ashamed to say that they didn't understand. And I think that's another thing that needs to be this is a muscle to practice. If you don't understand, say, raise your hand. I didn't understand what we're talking about. Say it again slowly.
Why is this happening? Because I'm asking very sincerely.
Mm.
I always ask a lot of questions. This is in my nature. A
Yeah.
lot of people actually don't like that because I'm always the one who is like, excuse me, excuse me. So what
Yes.
did we doing or what did you mean here? But so I've never was ashamed to ask a question, and I truly believe there is no stupid question.
I think it's shame. I think a lot of it is also people want to seem knowledgeable. And
Mhm.
especially often people with a lot of experience, they want to always feel like the smartest person in the room, and they want other people to think that they're smart and that they know what they're talking about. And if they stop and say, I have no idea what's being discussed, then I think to a lot of people, especially to people who have lower self confidence, that seems like too much of a risk outside of their comfort zone. Like, I can't tell these people I didn't understand. I'll pretend that I understood, or maybe even some people even convince themselves that they understood, and then only when they get back to
Mhm.
their computer later or whatever, they understand that I have no idea what's happening. I was in a lecture recently, actually, with a very senior person, a very senior female executive who said that she was in a meeting with about 15 different lawyers, and they were talking about something very crucial to the company that she was running. And it was a tax decision that needed to be made, and there was route A and route B, and they went on for an hour. And she understood about 50 minutes into this hour that she has no idea what's happening.
Mhm.
And she thought it she said she was describing it, she started sweating, and she was so nervous, and she was so scared. And she said in the end, "I have no choice. I have to tell them I didn't understand because I have to make this decision, and if I don't tell them I didn't understand and I make a decision, then I'm making a decision based off of nothing." So she raised her hand and she said, "Guys, listen, I'm really sorry, but I need you to draw this out for me on the board because I don't understand option B." And one of the lawyers got up and said, "Okay, I'll start explaining it." And he started drawing it out on the whiteboard. And then two other lawyers were like, "No, that's not option B." And he was the most senior person in the room. He's like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "No, that's not what we were talking about." And then she understood they didn't understand each other. And they were so confident and so sure that they were all on the same page that no one even stopped to think that maybe they weren't. And only because she had the guts to say, "Guys, I'm so sorry, but I have no idea what you're talking about,"
Mhm.
they understood that they weren't on the same page. They understood that the option they thought was the right option was actually not on the table. And they got to the best possible end solution for the company.
Yeah.
So it's scary, but it's necessary, especially to people of power. And again, I think it's something that it's a muscle you need to practice. You need to be able to confidently
Yeah.
say, I didn't understand. Let's review this again. And it's the same way as like you tell people before going into job interviews, decide what your salary expectations are and say them plainly and clearly. This is my number. Next. Not with apologies, not with anything, hesitations. You
Mhm.
have to say it. And it's the same with saying, I didn't understand. Again, please, without apologizing. There's nothing to apologize for. It needs to be clear, and if it's not clear, then we need to talk about it
Agree.
again.
I want now to take it to another side. What I mean by that. We now spoke a lot about the efforts I want definitely to do in my life to improve the understanding and my communication. But in your practice, where is this line where you tried to explain,
Mhm.
you asked like all you did everything, and then the understanding is not happening, or there is no proper the communication is not happening, the connection is not happening. Um, where is this line where you need to kind of
Give up.
give up, take a step back?
Yeah.
How many calls a day do we have? A lot.
Yeah.
Like work, and we're talking only about work calls.
Yeah.
So it also feels like you can't put the same effort into every
No.
conversation, not possible.
No.
So like where is the line, and also how much ambiguity you are willing to tolerate in the workspace?
So I think it depends. It depends on a lot of things. I also think when you're building work relationships, in the beginning, there's going to be a lot more ambiguity and you need to ask a lot more questions when you're starting in a new position or
True.
in a new company.
Yeah.
And that is something that is understood and also very tolerated by it's expected. Whenever there's onboarding, ambiguity is expected. And the challenge comes in when you've already been onboarded and maybe there are specific people where there's a lot of ambiguity with, maybe there are specific projects that suffer from ambiguity. And I think to me, at the end of the day, it's about taking responsibility, right? So some things I can take full responsibility for. I can be like, I understand that we're not aligned here.
Mhm.
And then I can either decide this is how I'm going to move forward because I'm running this project. If there are hard stops here for everyone, let me know. And hopefully it will clarify along the way. I can tell you that there have been times, for example, where I've seen even with founders that there's I wouldn't even say ambiguity, but there's an inability to come to an understanding. And sometimes we'll bring an external advisor for that. There actually are today even kind of like couples therapy for founders and for executives and companies, like psychologists that specialize in that to try to assist that understanding. Because
Between whom? Like
between two founders, for example, or two
okay.
executives.
Okay.
I've seen it both with co-founders in a major startup. I've seen it with executives that are having a hard, maybe they work together very well for a long time and everybody, still wants these two people to be part of the company, but they need help. Sometimes people need help. And I also think that's a very positive trait to have as a leader, is to know when you have to stop and ask for help. Because sometimes
Interesting.
it comes we have, I think, this concept a lot of times when someone's not understanding, it's like they're doing this to me. And oftentimes that's not the case. Oftentimes it's really just the
The
two people.
differences?
Yeah, it's the differences and it's the
Yeah,
different points of view and it's the different ways of thinking. And sometimes it can also be um again, this may be I don't know if it's an extreme example, but we are more aware as a society today of neurodivergent and neurotypical people, and that can also cause sometimes
true.
very, very, I wouldn't say serious, but very acute misunderstandings just because of the style
Yeah.
of speaking and the style of processing information. And I think that's something that we're more aware of these days also, which I think
Mhm.
is really good,
Yeah.
and really helpful. So it's knowing when to ask for help. It's knowing who to ask help from. Sometimes it can be someone, it can be a colleague, it can be an external advisor. Um, and I do also think sometimes at a certain point you can say there's too much miscommunication to move forward.
Mhm.
And I think if you tried and you tried to ask for help and you tried everything that you could, sometimes you just let things go and you either say, if it's not in my control, if it's not my project, and to say, like, I think this is what needs, let's do it this way, and then see if we need to adjust. Then sometimes you concede and say, let's do what you think needs to be done, and I will hopefully understand later on. Or sometimes the people decide to leave,
Yeah.
either leave a company or leave a position within a company. And I think that's also something that you need to feel comfortable doing if things come to that extreme. I don't think
Mhm.
that's a solution for everything, but I also think that that's it. At the end of the day, we all have to remember that jobs are not family, and if something, we are not trees. We can leave if we are.
Yeah. Taking responsibility.
Exactly, an
I love
ownership.
that. Yeah. Have you ever met, because we just talked about a few examples of leaders and
Hmm.
co-founders. Um, do you have experience working with a leader, with some senior executive that was brilliant in communication and in creating the understanding, and what he or she was doing differently, and what can you maybe share of what, like, some practical things the person was doing that made them a great communicator?
So I think there are a few people that come to mind, one of whom is another colleague of yours, Karen Cohen, who really just is, first of all, she has very little ego in the best way possible. She's a very confident woman, she achieved a lot of things and she's a very, like, one of the top professionals that I've ever had the privilege of working with. And as a result of that, she's very confident in her ability to know what she doesn't know. So she will be the number one person to say if people are just like talking bullshit for 30 minutes, she's going to stop the meeting and say, I didn't understand, start again. Just like that. And the first time I saw that happen, I remember I was like, what did she just say? And I thought that someone was gonna blow up the meeting, and then everyone was like, "Oh, okay, okay, my mistake." And they start again, and then everybody understood, and it made the entire meeting better. And I think that's coming from a place of being humble and but also confident at the same time, being like, "I know what I don't know,
Mhm.
and I will not be coy about it. If I need to understand this perfectly in order to move forward, and we're gonna leave until I understand." And I think that's something that's very kind of like a boss move to do, which I've adopted since. I think that's a really, really great thing to do. I also think something that I learned from another executive that I worked with in the past, Moti Pe'el, who is the CEO of a PR agency that I worked for, and now is the co-CEO of another PR agency, is he always always told everyone on the team, communicate even when there's nothing to communicate. And this goes back to what we talked about assumptions. Because sometimes you assume, oh, they know what we're working on. They know that we're working on this because we talked about it in the call last week, or they know that we're trying to do this
Mm.
because it's obvious. It's not obvious. And a lot of times, especially when you're working for external vendors or if you have a big team, something that seems obvious to you is not obvious to the rest of the people working with you. So communicate when there's nothing to communicate. Send a daily update. Send a touch point. Hey, are you doing this, this, and this? I know we talked about this yesterday. Just double checking. Can I help you with anything? Obviously, you have to be careful not to let it slide into the micromanagement of things, but it's all 9 times out of 10, it is more helpful. It moves things along. It makes everybody feel more involved, and it makes understanding a lot easier because you know what's happening. And the assuming that somebody knows, even if you haven't spoken to them about it, is really the cause of 99% of the problems, the assumptions, truly.
I think it's a great point to summarize all the practical things we talked about today. So, what is helping to create a better understanding? Not to make assumptions.
Mhm.
You just mentioned, and that's why I'm saying it like to me, they're connected, over communicate
Correct.
sometimes. Um, Ask questions and be open and present in the conversation. Just try to remind yourself, okay, like, I know I'm smart. I know about myself a lot of things, but
Mhm.
other people also know their things too. And
Right.
be open and let people speak and also be present. I really loved taking the responsibility.
Yeah.
Um, about everything and in communication, when taking responsibility for primarily your actions and when to stop and when to leave, or when to spend more efforts in communicating and over communicating and all of that. Did I miss anything?
I think you covered everything. Knowing maybe, also knowing when to say out loud that something is unclear. Like
And also knowing yourself better and knowing your limitations.
correct.
Awareness. I
Yeah.
don't remember if I mentioned it in the beginning, but like awareness and communication and generally in life,
Mhm.
something it's a life journey, like
It really is.
being knowing yourself and how you're changing. And yeah, and also knowing and remembering that even though you had a shitty morning,
Yeah,
like other people don't need to suffer because of it.
correct. It's not the room's fault that you had a
Yes.
bad morning.
Yeah.
Correct.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.